Welcome to Beyond Borders. I'm your host, Tony McCord, and today I'll be sitting down with Tony Nabors of Racial Equity Insights as he shares his family's journey from the United States to Africa. Join us as we discuss adapting to a new culture, unexpected challenges, and his experiences living in Tanzania and now Johannesburg with his wife and 4 children. Let's get into it. Good morning, Tony. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
All right. So can you tell our audience a little bit about your work with DEI and also what you've been up to with your travels?
My name is Tony Nabors. I'm the founder and owner of Racial Equity Insights. I work with organizations all over the U.S. and internationally who are in a space of genuine commitment to racial equity, diversity, equity, inclusion, all that good stuff. Beyond just checking boxes, but how can there actually be effective transformation that is also sustainable? So I do a lot of business strategy around racial equity. I do coaching, workshops and training, all of that sort of good stuff. And recently, as of last year, I've started offering a lot of workshops as well as just a lot of social media content to the public, just individuals that care about this stuff and desire to learn and grow and be equipped to be effective for some positive change.
Okay.
And so I've been doing the type of work for, about 20 years in some way, shape, or form. I've been at it for quite some time now. And I'm officially a digital nomad. And almost everything I do is online. As long as I have electricity and internet, I can do my work everywhere. And so about a year and a half ago, my family and I, we decided to move to Tanzania. And we were there for, again, about a year and a half. And then just recently moved to Joburg in South Africa about a month and a half ago now. So we've been doing a little bit of globetrotting. We'll continue to travel around. Eventually we'll find a spot. Maybe we'll drop anchor for a little bit longer, but we've just been enjoying the ride so far.
That's amazing. I just wanted to clear a few things up because when we talk about DEI in the United States, I've noticed that a lot of people really don't know what it is. Could you briefly just explain what it is and what its job is?
I'm happy to. So DEI is diversity, equity, and inclusion. Long story short, there is a lot of history, a lot of policy, a lot of laws, a lot of just actions that have happened since the inception and even before the inception of the U.S. as a country that lead us to a place now where there's a lot of unfairness in terms of accessing opportunities to thrive in this world. And we see that play out in virtually every aspect of society. We see this in education. We see this in the professional world with not only positions, but definitely with wealth and income. We see it with health and life expectancies. We see this with criminal justice system, political positions, just in so many different ways in which there is just unfairness and inequitability of access to thriving in all those areas and beyond. And so DEI is all about uncovering the background about why that is the case, and then putting forth strategy to make things more fair for more people. And so that's probably the simplest way that I would describe it.
Yeah.
And I would guess that most people would be in favor of fairness. But there's an all-out kind of assault against this work, especially over these last few years where it wasn't even recognized as really a thing by people who are, I'd say, opponents to justice and fairness and racial equity and those kinds of things. But now there's been a concerted effort to really redefine those terms in a way that causes a lot of fear and anxiety, I'd say, especially with white folks. And so I think it's important that we have an actual understanding about what it is that we're talking about, what the purpose of it is, and why it's something that everyone should be excited about. The world functions better when more people have more opportunities. Businesses thrive more. People have deeper communities and people have more opportunities for personal growth. There are just so many different benefits to DEI, both in terms of professional settings and just in the world. And so that's definitely the angle that I like to take because I'm really passionate and excited about it and want other people to be that too.
That's an amazing description because I think that a lot of it has been convoluted. I've noticed that there definitely has been a redefinition of what it actually is. And I just wanted to get your opinion, since you are so big in this space, that you could just explain it real quickly to everyone. I also wanted to talk about your move to Tanzania and now in Johannesburg with your family. What made you decide to leave the United States with your family? And when you did decide to leave the United States, what made you choose Africa?
That's a great question. And so we had always wanted to visit the continents. We're a Black family descended from enslaved Africans. And so it's always been a desire to at least visit the continent. And so we knew we had met a family at church years and years ago from Tanzania. I'm sorry, local folks say Tanzania.
Yeah, I know that.
We usually say Tanzania. I'll probably say both. But we knew a family from there, which is what put the country on our radar in the first place. And so my wife was doing research and doing a bunch of Googling and watching videos of other U.S. American folks that have been over there. And it just seemed like an interesting introduction to the continent for us, because there is enough English spoken that we wouldn't be just completely lost, but then a lot less, I'd say, westernization there compared to maybe other parts of the continent. So it just seemed, maybe this can be just a really new experience for us to feel a little bit about what it is to have an African experience that is less influenced by the West. I definitely wouldn't say it's not devoid of Western influence, but definitely a lot less Western influence. And then also it's really easy for Americans to get a visa in Tanzania. So there's way less hoops to jump through. We literally needed to do nothing on the way there. We bought our flight. Of course, you need your passport. We didn't even you fill in your visa form when you arrive. And the visa form is maybe about the size of a phone. You just fill in this little tiny form with really basic stuff about where are you from, where are you going, what kind of work do you do, some basic stuff like that. And then you're able to be there for 3 months at a time. And then there's stuff you need to do to keep renewing it 3 months after that, but it's very straightforward and easy. So that's why we chose Tanzania to begin with. And yeah, we were there again for about 1.5 years with a little bit of traveling in between, because some of that is required and necessary. But we were basically there. We were in Dar es Salaam for a year of that time. And then we were in Arusha for 6 months after that. And I think for me, it's a beautiful country. I'm from Washington State, so I don't know nothing about real beach life, but they've got beach life. The Indian Ocean is spectacular. And that's not even a word that I use really very often, but it's gorgeous. It's warm. It's calm, just so peaceful to go out to the beach and to relax. So that was really a great experience to be able to go to the beach. We started to learn a little bit of Swahili. We're very much still babies, but a little bit of Swahili. My wife is especially really good at building relationships and meeting people and making friendships. So we started to meet a handful of folks and started to find people that we could basically pay and employ to just help us get around. And so it was definitely a life-changing experience, one that I will always take with me for the rest of my life. There were definitely challenges too. Okay. So we don't want to be fully just rose-colored out here. There were definitely challenges. Certainly if you don't speak Swahili, you're just going to run into communication challenges. Yeah. People speak English, but it's not the primary language. So I myself, my whole career is presenting and speaking and talking and all that kind of stuff, but I'm very much an introvert. Like it wears me out to have to do a lot of small talk type stuff. So having to do that, being so reliant on the help of other people to get around, and then also having to do that across languages was very exhausting for me just because of how I'm built. So that was something that was just challenging. And the infrastructure is definitely not what I'm accustomed to from living in the States. And that was it was just new for me. There are power outages pretty regularly. Occasionally there'd be water outages, plenty of paved roads, but also plenty of dirt roads. And it's funny, I was sharing a little bit about being there on social media, and I just made like a random kind of vlog post. One of my kids wanted a replacement controller for his Nintendo Switch.
I saw that.
And it was a whole
Yes.
adventure.
Yep.
It
I
was like
did.
a whole
I saw
adventure.
that.
Hey, come with me. I'm going to try to find this. And it was funny because I had a couple of comments that were like, "Oh, can't you just order that on Amazon?"
Yeah.
I'm like,
see?
no,
Yeah,
I cannot
no.
order that on
A lot of
Amazon.
people
Amazon
don't
does
re-
not come here.
A lot of people don't realize that Amazon delivery outside of the United States have to go through customs. And there's a whole long process to get something delivered. So in Belize, it takes 6 to 8 weeks to get a delivery from Amazon. So yeah, it's not as easy as just
Yeah.
getting on your phone and making it happen. Did you, because I've noticed with infrastructure, it's something that you got to get used to it. Going to developing nations, it was a real culture shock for me. Tell me a little bit about that.
Oh my goodness. I was not prepared. Like we took a visit. We did a 5-week visit before we moved. But even with that, I was not fully prepared for the experience. I was definitely way more prepared than if we hadn't done the pre-visit. I'm so glad that we had the means to do a pre-visit, because so much crap that we would have taken with us that we just didn't need, that we could replace there. You don't know sometimes, but definitely neither of us were prepared for water outages. So we chose a house that had a water tank because we know that water outages can happen. But we didn't know when a water outage was happening. And it was happening there was like a whole week straight where the water was just basically out, but we didn't know that because it was coming from our water tank. We're just using water, taking our showers and using a washing machine, which is very rare to find in Tanzania. Not many people have washing machines, but we were lucky enough to find a place with a washing machine, which those use a lot of water. And we had no idea that the water was out until we emptied the tank. And then we had to make it work after that and buy big bottles of water. But there's so much that we just learned. There's so many ways that we're pretty spoiled living in the States with access to things. I now know how to take a bucket bath. If I have at least a little bit, I know how to bathe myself properly with that sort of setup. I even know how to do laundry with that sort of setup, which is one of my least favorite things to ever do. But I know how to do it now, right? Like I know how to do that.
Absolutely.
Because we just have situations that will come up.
Absolutely.
I think especially where I do a lot of live presentations, live paid presentations online.
Mm-hmm.
And so run into a situation where I'm mid-presentation, there's maybe 100 people logged into the Zoom, power goes out, or internet suddenly is just not working well. So at first, it was very stressful to have to figure that stuff out. But then I learned to get the proper backups.
Yeah.
So I learned that I have my primary internet, but then I've got a backup hotspot. And then also I can use my phone hotspot in a pinch. So I've got backups. We learned that we needed to invest in a generator because I'm that reliant on power. Again, I can't be presenting to a law firm or a city government or a university, and then suddenly I just vanish from the presentation, was not perfect. I learned to get those preparations, and that helps a lot. But I was definitely very frustrated and angry and annoyed for the first couple of months because I just wasn't fully mentally prepared for some of that.
Yeah, it takes a little while for all of that stuff to click. When I first left the United States, I went down to the Southern Caribbean, and it was a very remote area of the Caribbean, and everything was water catchment. There was no water on the island. So everything came from the rain. And I did not realize when I first got there that, you have to conserve water. And sometimes there is no power. And even most recently with me during rainy season in Belize, I was on solar power, and we had terrible storms for 2 months straight. It didn't stop raining. So if there was no sun, that there was no power. So having a backup generator, having to do your laundry by hand, having to take bucket showers. Yes, absolutely. I've been there in all of those situations and scenarios. And it takes a little while for you to wrap your mind around it. We definitely take technology and our infrastructure for granted. So having lived outside the US for the past 8 years, I'm definitely getting so much more used to it. And I appreciate it so much more when I'm back in the States. I wanted to ask you, have you noticed that there has been an exodus of Black people from the United States?
Yeah, I would say for me, it's all anecdotal. I haven't really done research to capture any hard numbers or anything like that. But I've even had, a couple of friends that we'll call it the Black exodus. It's just Black folks that are deciding to head out. I think I've made that observation as well. And I think that in particular, over the last, maybe, if I had to guess, maybe 5-ish years, there's been a lot of, I'm most aware of Black folks because that's my main community of moving out of the States.
Yeah.
And I think that I saw a big burst of that happen in response to the murder of George Floyd and just like the fear and the violence that happens in the States, as with COVID. Well, just a lot of fear about COVID spreading in the US and all the different sort of lockdown, just how everything was flowing.
Yeah.
And then there were, anybody tuning in, please fact check me if I'm incorrect about this, but I want to say that there were some pretty stunning statistics in Africa of showing just significantly lower numbers of spread and death and all that kind of stuff on the continent. To be fair, at least part of that is probably due to some countries that just are not capturing data. That, to be fair, and to be even on that. But this is just something else that I was hearing in the air. And yeah, it continues to be a pretty scary experience living in the States where we don't know what could happen with the random police stop. We don't know if we're going to be treated fairly in the education system or if we're going to get a fair shot at work. Or even if we do find a way to grab a career that pays well and maybe we buy a nice house in a nice neighborhood and maybe there are no other families there that look like us. And then maybe even that's part of my experience is I was able to buy a house in a town that's maybe 45 minutes outside of Seattle. Mm-hmm. And we were one of the only non-white families in the whole neighborhood.
Yeah.
And everybody pretty much ignored us and basically pretended like we weren't there. Even families where my kids would play with their kids and then we'd be out together and they would pretend like they don't see us and all that sort of stuff that is just really not a great experience. I think a lot of Black folks have been choosing to at least travel, if not fully relocate for whatever period of time.
Yeah. Have you found a sense of community in the areas that you've been living in Africa?
That's a great question. You know what? I will tell you, Tanzania was really tough for me.
Okay.
I was not able to really find community there. And I think there are some things culturally that are just out of step with my social beliefs.
Okay.
Where I would consider myself to be very left, very progressive, very much about the equality of marginalized groups, including women, including LGBTQ people. And Tanzania is very, I would say, socially conservative in terms of their ideals around a lot of that stuff.
Okay.
And so it's very difficult for me to just ignore when people have beliefs that are out of step with my human rights beliefs.
Absolutely.
If I prefer this food over that food, that's not a big deal, but I prefer for women to have rights versus I don't think that should be the case. I can't bridge that gap.
Yeah.
So there were some things there that were difficult for me. And I saw a lot of those more socially conservative beliefs, even with a good chunk of expats that were there too. And so that was something that was just challenging for me. I would say I met a handful of people that were really cool that I was starting to build some community with before we did a little bit of moving and shifting around. Mm-hmm. And so that was a little bit more challenging.
Yeah.
I feel very hopeful about being in Johannesburg because South Africa actually has a very progressive constitution, which I didn't fully know about. And we've already met LGBTQ folks who are very visibly living their lives and feeling free in that, which is very encouraging to me. As a matter of fact, our manager that helps us with our apartments he out and open and identifies as gay and queer. During our previous year, she did one of those Airbnb experiences and did a tour.
Yes.
And her tour guide is a queer Black man. Where I saw a selfie, two of them, and I was like, "Oh, who's that lady?" It's just that's him. I'm like, "Oh gosh, okay." I didn't realize he just dresses very feminine, right?
Good.
And just the fact that he feels comfortable being himself is very encouraging. A heterosexual guy, I love seeing people live their best, freest selves in life.
Exactly.
It's very encouraging about being here. Mm-hmm. And now I just need to get myself out of the house so I can get out the house more often so I have more opportunities to meet people.
That was another thing that I noticed because I've been mainly in the Caribbean and Central America, and I have noticed the conservative mindset in those communities as well. And that is a little bit difficult, especially in the line that I was working in, helping people to relocate and having to explain to people that being LGBTQ in the Caribbean and Central America probably isn't the best place for you to be, just simply because they are socially conservative nations down there. You have to find your place in the world that is going to be accepting. Those are the kind of things that you definitely have to research. And being out of step with your beliefs. I mean, for me, even I have more progressive beliefs than most of the people in the nations that I was living in. And I found that there were a lot of people from the States that would go to those countries and then their beliefs would get even more amplified. So it was just sometimes a very uncomfortable situation for me. So now I'm just trying to figure out where in the world I want to go, because wherever it is, it definitely has to be open to all kinds of people, different kinds of lifestyles, just different kinds of beliefs, and accepting of it. And I think that society as a whole, I think that's the direction that this world is moving into. And I'm hopeful for the future, but it is very frustrating when you run into those very old mindsets and ways of thinking and being.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I agree.
How has your family been adjusting to being abroad as a family unit? Like you were talking about your wife, how she's really good at bridging gaps and making conversation and starting relationships. And then your children, I saw the pictures of your kids. They're so cute. So tell me a little bit about your family dynamic, moving abroad and living in Tanzania and now in Johannesburg.
So my kids are so flexible and go with the flow that I think in general, they've been just going with the flow. They have actually, this is something that's cool because this was unprompted, but two of my kids just verbalized that they really liked that they look around and people look like them. Because that was just never their experience living in Washington. So that's just my heart. This is beautiful that they acknowledge that and they appreciate that and enjoy that. So that's something that's really cool. My oldest son loves animals and we'll say most bugs, not all bugs, most bugs. And so to be in like a tropical climate is just like his jam. You can find lizards, you can find whatever bugs and insects that he likes. We saw like a little baby, I don't know, some sort of butterfly-ish creature, but this thing was like this big. It's got this picture of him holding it and it's like big old giant creatures or whatever the case is. He was loving that. There was like a few months where we were living in a space that just didn't have as much green around it. So that was not the best because I have that easy access to that.
Yeah.
But he is really enjoying that too.
And how old are they?
And then my wife, my boys are 12, almost 10, 7, and 4. So I have to like think about it. There's so many of them. My wife had a great experience. Like she had a great experience of just building community, meeting people. She is especially gifted at creating community space for women and then just encouraging and building people up. She has made several specific women's spaces that have been very nurturing for community and also pouring back into her, just getting reconnected with parts of who she is that have been more difficult to find in Washington than having kids and that kind of thing. And she even wrote a book. She wrote a book that's basically about empowering women during their cycle. The book's called Moontime. Malika Amrab.
No.
So anyway, there was a really growing space for her in a lot of different ways. I think a lot of ways she was living her best life so that she was able to experience, she's able to experience those things and build that community, that kind of stuff. She also loves freshness and newness. And so she's, hey, what if we check out South Africa? I'm like, I'm down. Okay, let's definitely check out South Africa. And the kids have really been loving it here in South Africa for very shallow reasons. They love the fact that the internet is faster. They love the fact that there's more fast food options, really basic type stuff.
Yeah,
but there's also a lot more to do also, like more zoos and museums and parks and all that kind of stuff, which has been really nice also. Certainly, some of the growth has been just by challenge and just figuring stuff out. And there's definitely been ways that it's been even challenging in our relationship of just figuring out, like, how do we do things here and how do we find community here? And There's definitely, I don't want to put forth this idea or this image that it's just been all butterflies and rainbows. There's definitely been some pretty tough parts to it and tough seasons. But it feels like another one of those things where even with the tough pieces, there are very significant spaces of learning and growth that come from those spaces.
Yeah.
Even with the stuff that's been challenging, I still feel just a sense of recognition of the necessity of some of that for our growth as well.
Yeah. It's funny that you should mention with your relationship, because I recall speaking to a couple of my previous clients, and there were instances where there wasn't a complete agreement between the partners, whether that was something that they should really be doing together. And I had to tell them that unless the two of you are cohesive and on board with all of this together, this will test your relationship like nothing ever has. Honestly, in all of the years that I have been traveling and living abroad, I've met so many people that are single now, but they started out as couples, leaving the United States to travel the world together. And it just didn't work out because they weren't open to learning how to communicate and be in relationship with each other in a new environment. Because it's not just about living in a different country. It's how does your relationship change when you move to this other country? Because it's going to be different. You're going to be adjusting to different spaces, and everybody adjusts to things differently. So if you're not adjusting together in a positive way, it could turn into a disaster. And not just that, is that you have children on top of it all. You're not just doing that in the United States. You're doing that in a completely foreign environment with different languages and all the things that go along with it. So if you don't have a supportive partner within all of it, it is just a disaster.
No, that's all very true. And I think especially in the context of wanting to set accurate expectations for people, I think that's really important. I think all of that, even on top of just natural changes, we're both 40 and biologically there's stuff going on with me and stuff going on with her. And so just ways in which we're growing as people physically, we're figuring ourselves out mentally, emotionally, we're figuring out our own relationship. And on top of all that, we've been married for, almost 17 years. We've been together for a really long time.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. And we're not the same people that we were when we were in our early 20s and got married. Figuring all of that out together. Who am I at age 40? And what makes me tick? What are my values? And what are my needs and that kind of thing? And her doing the same. And then us figuring out, okay, what does that look like for us to walk this road together as kind of new people compared to who we were before, and to be able to do that together and to support each other and find all those spaces of in sync. It's a whole situation. It certainly gets amplified internationally when you don't have that sense of just things that you're accustomed to and used to that you don't even have to think about when you're at your home states.
Exactly. It will put you into situations that you have never been in before. And how you sink or swim within all of it is pretty amazing. Looking back on your journey, what have been some of the most rewarding aspects of moving abroad with your family?
Ooh, that's a good question. Some of the most rewarding aspects. One thing that comes to mind is just the increased global mentality. There are definitely ways that I'm an anti-racism, DEI educator professional, right? So already by just nature of the work that I do in my passion, I'm always looking to push back against common narratives and common ways of being that are just accepted, that are maybe rooted in stuff that is, I had no clue just how very American I am, even in spite of that. Like, I'm still very American, and I did not realize that in terms of how I communicate, in terms of what I value, in terms of stuff that frustrates me, in terms of stuff that I expect. I just had no clue until I moved abroad. And then just even certain things where, maybe there's an interaction with somebody who I'm asking for help or directions or just something basic like that. Or maybe somebody who is providing service at a restaurant or something. In the States, if we see a random stranger, we'll just say, hey, excuse me, can you tell me where I can find blah, blah, blah? They'll tell us. That's the interaction, right? Or the restaurant, we're ready to order. I'd like blah, 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 blah. That's very rude in Tanzania. You don't just jump right in with the requests. Hey, hello. How was your sleep? How'd you wake up this morning? You have a human interaction first before you dive into business. And that's something I didn't even catch about myself. And then it was taught to me by people that we got to know and got to meet and that were helping us with all sorts of things. So they taught us the language and just, oh, I didn't even catch that. I don't even check in to the humanity of people before I just want to get down to business. Like, oh gosh, that's very American of me. I didn't realize that was in there. So just this more global understanding of self, definitely a high appreciation of being able to observe how just interdependent people are in Tanzania. There's such a community aspect of connecting and helping and all that kind of thing, where we had a situation where we had the gift of traveling to Zanzibar for a few days, and we brought our driver with us. He didn't do much driving in Zanzibar, but he helped us to translate, and of course we paid him and all that kind of stuff. And we had a situation where we paid for a tour guide to walk us through. At least we were told he was a tour guide, but it was a weird situation because we found out after the fact his English wasn't very good. His attitude seemed funky. And we're like, dude. So again, we're very American at this point in time. And we're like, I think we should fire this guy. You don't seem like you want to be here.
Yeah.
But we had the wherewithal to say, you know what? Before we do that, we're having lunch. He's doing his thing over here. Jonathan, who was our driver that we paid and was helping us, and was our translator, we asked him first, like, hey, Jonathan, like, what do you think about this? I don't know if we're really feeling this. What do you think? And he said, you know what? Let's not do that yet. Let me talk to him and let's just see what happens. And then he ended up talking with the guy. And basically, Jonathan just decided to be our translator.
Okay.
So the tour guide took us around and spoke Swahili. Jonathan, we had a great experience.
There you go.
It was awesome. And then we were able to put some money in this guy's pocket for the tour, which we enjoyed. But then what was funny is that after that, Jonathan, we went our separate ways. Jonathan was going to take the ferry back to Dar es Salaam. We were going to go to our hotel. Jonathan mistimed his travel and missed the ferry. And we're like way on the other side of the island. And he basically just called the tour guide. Oh my gosh, I missed my ferry. Can you help me to find a hotel situation that fits my budget? And the guy was super helpful and got him connected to lodging that was super comfortable, felt good. We ended up paying to make it so it wasn't a financial burden. And it's just that interconnection with these are two strangers that had never met before that day.
Yeah.
And they were just automatically looking out for each other and going above and beyond and putting forth all this extra effort. That's something that was just so educational for me. Just these ways of being that I just never would have never would have occurred to me to do humanity in this way outside of this. So that sort of stuff I think is just really cool that I hope will not wear off. I hope I'll keep remembering that stuff and look to find ways to embody it in my life too.
I think that more so outside of the United States, that is the norm, especially when you get into developing nations where everybody helps everybody out because we all win when we all win. So it's just much more common to find those types of situations once you leave the United States and people aren't so siloed and cut off.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you think you might have done differently now looking back?
If I could do anything different, gosh, I don't know. I don't know what I would have done different because certain things, even things that were tough, I had to experience them to learn. There were certain ways in which financially we had to be very vigilant with certain financial interactions because it's a developing country and people got to hustle to make it happen for them on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And we ran into some situations where we were taken advantage of. But I feel like ultimately it doesn't harm us long term because we've got USD and I'm a business owner and ultimately it's not destroying us even the ways that we might be taken advantage of.
Yeah.
So I think being able to learn and see some of those things and be able to figure out how can we be understanding and gracious and generous, but then also be in a position where people are not treating us like we're just dumb foreigners that don't know anything. I want to be respected in the same way that I will be respectful for all people. And so learning what that looks like in Tanzania, it's just very different than what it looks like in the States. And then I think ultimately we got to a place where people that we worked with, we got to leave them better off than when we started working with them, but in a way that's honoring to their humanity, not the sort of, hey, we're the U.S. savior is going to fix everything. No, we're respecting mutual respect of humanity, but then also trying to be, generous and kind with those interactions too. And we would never have known or learned some of that stuff if we didn't have some of the not so great experiences from the outset. Maybe I would have waited a little bit longer before making the move because I don't think I was maybe fully emotionally ready for when we moved. But my wife, she was very ready to go. So we eventually just went. So maybe if I would have waited a little bit longer for myself to just feel fully emotionally ready, that probably would have been one thing I would have done differently. Okay. But I think the experiences that we had, we really needed to have.
I understand that. Okay, so is there anything that you'd like to share with our audience about where our listeners can connect with you and follow your journey or learn more about your work in DEI?
Yeah, so I am pretty consistent with sharing stuff on social media, particularly about my DEI work. At Racial Equity Insights, Instagram is the main platform I use. I also use TikTok to a lesser degree. Very rarely I might be on LinkedIn, but it's usually Instagram or TikTok. Also, my website, www.racialequityinsights.com. And I work with businesses globally that are looking for support in this area. And I also have public classes that I open up for any individual that might want to pop in and have some education for their personal life. Okay. And I also have on-demand e-courses on my website too, www.racialequityinsights.com /stores where the courses are at. Yeah, please feel free to follow me, check my stuff out. And I try to be very practical and clear with my communications. Wherever your experience might be, you're gonna get something out of it.
All right. Thank you so much, Tony, for joining me today. I had such a great time talking to you and getting to know you and learning more about your experiences traveling to Africa and living there with your family. And I will be following along your journey and checking you out on social media too. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tony. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining me on Beyond Borders. I want to extend my thanks to Tony Nabors for sharing his story with me. And I hope you've enjoyed this glimpse into a digital nomad family's African adventure. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel for future updates as I explore the stories that go beyond borders and inspire us to appreciate the beauty of our world. Until then, keep dreaming, keep exploring, and embrace the journey of life.